Welcome to video 32. This video focuses on file handling, specifically reading from text files using iteration. So the purpose is to understand the scope of what you need to know on the GCSE course regarding file handling. So that's reading from and writing to files, and to know how to use Python techniques to read text into a Python program. Just a reminder, guys, that the Python Monster resources on Schoology have not only the videos and the booklets in there, but some other useful resources as well, including two catalogue views, one of which divides up the videos into a playlist, and the other one gives you more detailed view of the videos in sequence order. So on the screen is an extract from the OCR syllabus for your course, and this part relates to OCR's ERL, or Exam Reference Language. This is always a good guide for the scope of the constructs and the syntax you're expected to know on the course. And you can see here references to simple syntax. So for example, reading from a text file and writing to a text file. So we have those here. Okay, so two simple constructs, two simple lines of code to read and write. And to process a file, a simple iteration using a while loop, which is here, guys. Okay. So I would suggest that even for the demanding requirements in a practical programming project, the challenge will not be so much how to read and write text to a file, but how to handle the data after you've read it from the file, and how to organize the data before you write it to the file. Those are going to be more challenging than the mechanics of actually how you open, read text and write text. So I don't think there's really much need for anything more complex than simply iterating through a file and either reading a line at a time or writing a line at a time. There are more advanced techniques, such as dumping the whole file, which is what you can do in Python. So having said all that, I will at some point put some videos on the file handling playlist to look at the bigger scope of what Python offers. If you are interested also, the Python Monster booklet number 4 covers all of the available Python tools and techniques that you can use with text files. If you are interested now, you can read through that. Before we leave this page, note that the ERL also includes creating a new file. Okay, so that's here. And also includes closing a file as well. And of course, opening a file from the outset. So we'll talk about all of those when we come to do some demos. Lastly then, guys, the syntax for iterating through a file line by line is slightly different in Python. There's been a number of changes over different versions of Python over the years. So the syntax that you're looking at here is very common in programming languages, but Python offers something a little bit more practical, and we will be looking at the syntax that Python uses in the demos, and then I will make a comparison between the two. So before we start the demos, guys, just to make it clear what to expect in these first couple of videos at least, I'm going to keep file handling as simple as possible, and I'm going to focus on using line by line iteration, because you are only expected to know basic file handling for your GCSE. Iteration is the only construct by example in the ERL spec of the syllabus, and to be honest, line by line iteration will suffice for your needs in any practical programming project as well. Now, there are lots of other options available in Python 2, which you are of course welcome to explore, and Python Monster Book 4 will give you the vast majority of those if you are interested in more advanced techniques. But you may well be using these videos for revision, so I'm deliberately avoiding these more advanced options, and particularly because they can easily cause a lot of confusion with file handling in Python as well. So guys, the first thing I need to do is to show you the standard modern day way that we use Python to work with text files. Okay, so this is the standard syntax for opening a file, whether we want to read from it or write to it. It's the same syntax, and it looks like this. We have two initial words, and we say with open. Okay, and then we want a set of brackets followed by a little nickname for our file, so we don't actually have to work with the name of the actual text file in our code. So I will put here as my file, so that's my little nickname. okay, for the file that we're going to use. Okay, what do we put in the brackets? Well, two parameters in the brackets. We want the name of the file, and then we want to tell Python whether we are reading from the file, writing to the file, appending to the file, or both reading and writing. More on that in the next video, but for the moment in this video we're just reading. So what we will do is we will put as a string data type the name of the file. Okay, so as you guessed guys, I'm going to be using an extract from Harry Potter to work with in this video, and then we want to put comma for our next, which indicates for Python how we actually want to open that file and work with it. So I'm going to put R in there, which of course, as you've guessed, tells Python that this is read only. In the next video guys, I'll show you all of the different options that you can put in that second parameter, but that will suffice for the moment. Okay, and then guess what? We put a colon at the end followed by an indentation. Why would that be, guys? Because just like the other constructs that you've seen this use, that's iteration, if statements, subprograms, we need to tell the Python interpreter that this block of code needs to be interpreted as a whole, or a standalone block of code. So it's another example where we need to use the colon and indentation. So before we go any further, I'm just going to put a comment at the top, and I'm just going to make reference to the ERL equivalent. So here I'm going to put file.open, okay, and assign to a variable, because this is the equivalent here of the ERL spec, which says that we need to have a file open function of some description, okay, and we need to assign the file to a variable name, and we've got both of those here. In fact, the with open part of our syntax is essentially the equivalent of the ERL file.open. So this is the point where we're opening the file, and this bit here we can get away, if you like, with saying that this is the equivalent of assigning our file to a variable. It doesn't quite work like that, but it will do for our purposes, guys. Okay, so we have the equivalent of file open there, and we're working with a variable name or a sort of nickname for our file. Okay, so next thing I need to do is to read in the first line of the file, and the syntax that I'm going to use in these videos for reading from a file is readline, which is almost exactly the same as the ERL version. Okay, so I'm going to put here, indented of course, okay, read the first line of the file. Okay, and what I'm going to do is quite simply line, which is the name of my variable. Let's make sure that's indented. So line becomes, and then we want my file, which is my little variable or nickname for Harry Potter.text, and then we want .readline. Okay, almost exactly the same as the ERL equivalent. Okay, a single line of code where we assign the first line of the file to a variable called line. Okay, so after I've done that, I then need to iterate through the rest of my file. Okay, now the significance of reading in just one line will become a little clearer later on, guys. Okay, but this tends to be the standard structure for reading from a file in Python. Okay, so let's loop through. Okay, so loop through, okay, the text file to read line by line. So we want a while loop. Okay, so we say while. Now you'll notice in the ERL, let's put another line in here. So in the ERL syntax, guys, and it's the same in most traditional programming languages, we would say while not EOF or end of file. Okay, so there are different ways that you can specify the condition here. The one that I'm going to use most closely matches traditional programming syntax, which is the not end of file. So whilst what I'm going to put in here is while line, okay, not equal to, and then basically those two, let me just zoom in, guys. Okay, those two are quotes. There's nothing in between, guys. They're back-to-back quotes. Okay, and what that means is whilst the line does not equal null. So that's the same as the traditional syntax that says while not end of file. Okay, so in Python, while the line does not equal a null, in other words, there is text to process. Okay, then what we need to do is put a colon on the end, because of course this is a loop and iteration, so we need to put a colon followed by indentation. So we simply need to print the line to the screen. This is what we're going to do to start with, just to print out to the screen. Okay, so let's make sure that's indented. We simply want to print line. And then, of course, as we're iterating, we want to read in the next line in the text file. So what I'm going to do is quite simply to copy this line here and then pop it in underneath here. Okay, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit there. Okay, so before I run this, I'll just put some comments in actually, which says here, this is end of loop, and then right over here, this will be the end of file handling, because when we get to this point in the code, we've done all of our file handling. Okay, we're outside the bit where we've opened the file. The other thing I'm going to put here is my file dot close. All right. My file dot close, which was also mentioned in ERL, but with this particular construct, guys, and using this particular Python method for opening files, we don't need to manually close the file because Python does it for us automatically. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why Python programmers use this particular construct and syntax a lot, because if they forget to manually close the file with a line of code that says myfile.close, it won't matter because Python does it automatically. And on many occasions it's very, very easy to forget to close the file, and then it gets left open, stuff gets left in the buffer and not written to the file, or it gets corrupted. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why the with open syntax is much, much preferred in modern day Python, and that's one of the reasons I'm using it with you here. Okay, so before we run the file, I'm just going to show you what the actual original Harry Potter text file looks like. Okay, so there it is on the screen. So basically we've got 4 paragraphs. There's about 26 lines of text in there, and then we're going to read in the whole lot through iteration. Okay, so I'm just going to close that, and let's run this and see what we get. Okay, and you can see we get something very similar, but obviously, guys, straight away you can see the difference. We've got an extra blank line in between each of our lines of text, and I will explain to you why that is, and why, and a method for getting rid of those extra blank lines that we don't actually want. Why do we get extra lines printed with our screen output then, guys? Well, our code generates a new line because we are iterating and repeating the print function. So this automatically generates a new line in the output window each time we iterate through and we come across the print function. But in addition, there are hidden formatting characters in the text file. We call these escape characters, and one of the reasons that even in Notepad you get new lines or text nicely formatted, as you saw earlier with the Harry Potter.txt file, is because there are hidden new line characters or escape characters in the text itself. So there's already an action in the text to generate a new line. So we're doing this type of thing twice. Now when I finish this demo, I'll put up on the screen a full list of the escape characters that Python recognizes. So at the moment then, we just need to tell Python not to include a new line each time it iterates, because that is already built into the text as a new line or new line escape characters. And the new line escape characters is the \n. So we need to tell Python to not to include a \n in its formatting. So the way that we do that, guys, is we quite simply put here on print, okay, the end parameter, which you may have seen before. Now normally I would put a gap, a space in between the quotes, okay, but to ask Python to essentially print on the same line and leave the new line formatting to the escape characters, I put here just 2 quotes back to back, okay, and that's the syntax that we use just to tell Python to keep printing on the same line. So let's run that then and see what we get. Okay, and that looks much better, doesn't it? What a difference, eh? Okay, so now our formatted text that we printed out on the screen through iteration looks exactly the same as the original Harry Potter text file that you saw earlier. So before we move on, I just wanted to highlight, to focus, this one line here, because even though it's in the middle of an iteration, and even though it's part of the handling files structure at the top here, guys, you've seen this one line of code many times before. It's essentially a line of code which says take a simple string and assign it to a variable. And in that context, guys, if you forget for the minute that it's part of file handling and you forget that you're in an iteration, you can do exactly the same with that string variable as you would in any other type of program where you want to handle strings. So at this point in the iteration, you could, if you wanted to do some quite complex string handling within your iteration. So you could be quite innovative in managing the input that you get from the file on the fly as part of that iteration. So you could, for example, do a search by using the Python find function. You could replace characters using the Python replace function. You could strip characters out from the leading and trailing edges using strip. You could even do some substring generation by using Python slicing, and of course you could even assign your results to a different variable, use concatenations, and create a different version of the text from the file as you are going through the iteration. Okay, so don't be afraid to put all of the code or consider all of the code that you need as part of your file reading routine. You could actually, if you wanted to, call one or more subprograms from this point in your code, and you could actually use subprograms to manage more complex string handling if you wanted to do that. So having said all of that, you may take a different approach actually and simply read all of your text into a variable and then process the text after the file handling. So basically you have two common choices to do this. You can assign all of your text to a string, or you can also assign your text to a Python list. Now you could, in theory, also use a traditional array, but what would be the problem with an array, guys, based on what you know? Well, a traditional array is of fixed size, and you might not know the size of your text file. So arrays can be used, especially more modern forms of arrays that you get in other high-level languages, high-level programming languages, but we are really spoilt with the flexibility of Python lists as a data structure. So Python list is a very good option as a suitable data structure to store our text file as well. So let's start with assigning all of the text to a single string using iteration and concatenation. So the first thing I'm going to do is to assign myself, if that's the right word. So let's put in here, not assign myself. So I'm going to say assign a text variable, okay, text variable as none. I will explain that in a sec. And I'm going to put in here text equals, and then I'm just going to put two single quotes back to back, which, as you know from previous examples, essentially means that I'm assigning text with a null value. So it just gives Python a clean value to work with, which isn't of any use to us particularly, but it avoids a syntax error if Python doesn't recognize text as having been assigned with anything at all. Excuse me, guys. So assign a text variable as none, and then quite simply we're going to use concatenation to build up and populate our string with each individual line within the file. So let's get rid of the print statement here, because we're not going to be printing now. And all I need to do is to say, okay, text becomes the old version of text concatenated with the most recent line that's been read in from the file. Okay, now let's do that and see what we get. Oh, we need to print it first, don't we, guys? Sorry. Okay. So let's put print the text, and then we want print, just print the text. Okay, let's see what we get. So let's run that. And there we go, guys. So we've got all of the text with the formatting in place that you would expect to see in the actual text file. And of course that's worked because even though we've taken out that parameter for removing the end of line character within our text, of course we haven't done that this time, and we need that in there because it's been assigned to whole text string, so we need the escape character, the \n, to tell Python where and how to print on the screen. So let's look at what happens when we assign all of the text to a Python list. So the output, guys, is going to be different because our lines of text are essentially assigned as the individual index values of the list. So the first line of text that will be at index 0, the second line of text that's read in will occupy index 1 in the list, and so on. Okay, so what you're actually going to see across the screen is a single list from left to right showing all of the text values at the different index points in the list. Okay, so you're not going to see formatted text. That comes a little bit later. Excuse me. So what do we need to do? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to change this from text equals null value to text equals the declaration of a list. Okay, now normally I'm guilty of this. I tend to be quite liberal with using the word assign and declare. Technically speaking, when we use this particular format, we're not really assigning a list per se. We're actually declaring a structure, declaring an example of a list data structure, because it's of 0 size. So basically it doesn't really exist. It's of 0 size. It doesn't have any values at all. So we can't really say that we're assigning a list. We can say that really that we're declaring a list. Okay, so I'm just being a little bit pedantic just to make a point really. So we declare a list data structure. Okay, and it will actually be assigned with values later on in our code when we do our first append. Okay, and all I need to do is I need to change the concatenation to a list append. So this becomes text.append, and then of course the value to append will be each individual line that we read in from the text file. So let's run this and see what we get. And as promised, guys, we have a single list of elements printed across the screen. Now you can spot straight away where the end of each particular item of text is, because you've probably spotted there's the \n character. Why does that suddenly appear? Well, it appears because in the list data structure that \n is no longer serving the purpose of an escape character, so it's not a hidden formatting character anymore. It's not actually used. Okay, so it is actually included as a real character or characters literal in the string item. Okay, it's quite nice to be able to see it, because that means that we can spot formatting characters within lists, and we can actually use Python to get rid of those, which we will do in a second. Don't get confused, guys, with these commas, because these are punctuation commas, not syntax commas. Okay, so our actual valid comma is here, and this is the comma that's being used as the syntax to separate each individual item of text that occupies in each index value in our list. And we can confirm that because we have quotes in pairs, guys, here. Okay, so if I just put this across the top, hopefully you can see that these individual characters actually have an opening and a closing quote at the top as well. So you can also do a sort of extra confirmation of where each individual string item in our list starts and stops. Okay, so how do we get rid of that annoying visible escape character, that \n? Well, what we need to do is we need an extra line of code, and we're going to use the Python strip function to get rid of that, to literally strip out that those two characters from the end of each string item. We need to do that just after we read the item in from the file, of course. So let's go back to our get rid of the box. Let's go back to our code, and we just need one line of text here, guys. Okay, so as soon as we read the line in, okay, what we basically need to say is line becomes, I'm going to use the same variable, so I'm going to reassign a value to the existing variable. So line becomes a new version of line, which will be line dot, and then we want strip. Okay, and then in here we want to put our two escape characters, the / and the n. Okay, so let's run that. Very simple, it's just an extra line of code. Okay, and now you can see, guys, that we do indeed have the \n stripped out from each end of our individual string item. There we go. Okay, good. So the question then is, how do we actually work with our list to make it a little bit more useful? Because at the moment it's just literally the list of items that occupy the list printed across the screen. How do we display that or format that in a more useful fashion? Well, let's move this across. We can use Python collection iteration, which you would have seen before in the classroom or via previous videos, guys. So let me just move this down, and I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so rather than printing the list in its entirety, I'm going to use iteration. So I'm going to say for, and let's say each line, because that's my variable name, in the list. Okay, so text. Okay, and then we simply want to print, okay, each line. There we go. So we're using iteration to drill down, okay, and print each individual item or element of text in our list. So let's see what we get now. Okay, and there we go, guys. So basically we can use lists, and by iterating through the list we can recreate the same text that we had in our original Harry Potter text file. Quick question, guys. If we've stripped out the \n character, why are we getting text on a new line? Well, quite simply because each new line that we read in is a separate item in the list, and naturally when we iterate, okay, each time we iterate we print on a new line. So what if you wanted to access the individual characters within your text? Well, we can go a step further. I'll just change this actually because it's a little bit out of date now, isn't it? I should say here, use collections iteration, okay, because this is the special this is a special syntax that Python makes available to us when we want to work with collections like lists. So for each line in text, okay, print each line. What we're actually going to say is we're going to drill down a bit further, and we're going to say for chars in each line. All right, so we've got a nested loop now, and this time we're going to print out chars. Okay. So in this particular printout, not so useful simply to print out the characters, okay, but it's just to demonstrate that you can actually gain access to the characters, each individual character within all of your text files, if you wanted to do that, guys, as well. Okay, so let's run this to see what we get on the screen, out of interest really. Okay, and there you can see, guys, that essentially on each iteration, if I just go right back up to the top, or maybe that wasn't such a good idea. There you go. So we've got Mr. here. So you can see straight away, guys, that each line is now essentially limited to dealing with an individual character. Okay, so this nested loop structure, where we're using specifically Python iteration for collections, works really well to keep on drilling down to get to the lower level of data. Okay. So I was hoping in this video to show you some useful tricks of the trade, some little tools of the trade, which are very useful, not for your exams because it's not part of your theory, but little techniques which would be very useful for your practical programming project if you were to be working with text files and text and file handling. But we're running towards half an hour for this video, so what I'll do is I will carry across the little tricks of the trade to the next video, where we will also be dealing with how to write to and append to a file as well. Before I go though, guys, there's just one thing I wanted to show you, because you may find that on the internet and in textbooks as well, typically you won't see the iteration condition written in this way. Okay, now I've chosen to write it in that way because basically it makes sense, because it's the nearest that we have to the traditional end of file condition, okay, using Python. But what you will often see, rather than it expressed as does not equal null, you will very often see just this, okay, which is essentially all of this gone and just while line, or whatever variable the author has chosen to use on their website or in their book. Okay, so if you see this format, this syntax here, guys, that's another way of basically saying the same thing. It's a shortened way, but I, in both the Python booklets and in this video, have stuck with a syntax which looks close to the original traditional syntax that we tend to have seen, which is not end of file. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why I have stuck with this particular syntax or format. Okay, so it's just to clarify if there was any confusion with you reading around file handling and were wondering why it is that you're seeing two different conditions expressed in different ways. Right, guys, okay, I will see you in the next video.